Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the continuation of Burn Your Wings. This will be part 22, chapter 22, entitled, Looking Forward to Growing Old with You. Alright, the show should start soon, Mirio says cheerfully. He hoists Eri up into his arms so that she can see over the crowd of people that are gathered to see Class 1A's performance. Soon the lights turn off and the curtains begin to draw open. Mirio gives Eri a little squeeze. Eri holds her breath for a moment before, in true 1A fashion, they begin with a bang. Plus ultra, after all, as Eri will quickly come to learn. The gym is bombarded by an explosion of light and sound, so intense that Eri feels like she'll be blown away. She tightens her grip on Mirio's shoulders, frightened for a moment, before she finds a familiar face smiling at her on the stage. Izuku, Deku, her older brother, her angel, finds Eri's eyes with unerring accuracy. He grins at her, bright and warm and carefree, and Eri feels like her hands can instantly relax. From then on, she's able to take in the show properly. Music like she's never heard before blasts in her ears. People in bright clothes are dancing on the stage with big smiles, and everyone begins to cheer and laugh along as if it's contagious. Togeda points to Izuku, who hooks his arm with another boy, and throws him up in the air where he spins around and becomes a human disco light. Izuku gives Eri one last grin and a thumbs up before hurrying behind the curtains. Your screen time's way too short, Togeda laughs, but even without him, Eri isn't afraid anymore. For such a long time, Chisaki had been a constant present in her life. Not just physically either. Chisaki was the hand behind every researcher. He was the spray of blood from every murdered babysitter. He was the shackles of the bandages that were wrapped around her limbs. He was the ghost chained to her shadow. He was the voice that whispered in the darkness and the nightmare that she couldn't wake from. Even after she was rescued, even after she believed that she could be saved, Eri could still feel Chisaki's presence like a cold, heavy cloak draped over her too small frame. But here Eri can't see Chisaki's ghost in the dazzling lights. She can't hear his flat voice over the bombastic music. She can't feel his cold grasp through the heat of the crowd. Here, Eri is so overwhelmed that there is no space for even Chisaki's memory. She's too busy taking in the sights with wide eyes, too astounded by the swell of music and cheers, too swept up by positive energy vibrating through the entire area. Sometimes, release doesn't happen through an active struggle for freedom. Eri simply forgets about Chisaki. She takes in a deep breath. She throws her arms into the air. And she laughs. Sorry, am I late? Izuku pants as he joins the special effects team on the rafters after finishing his stunt with Aoyama. Nah, you're right on time, Sarah reassures him. Koda is nodding in agreement. Izuku takes a moment to sweep a glance over the crowd. The performance is reaching its climax with both Class 1A and the audience pumped up, but there's one more role he has to play. Or rather, they. Izuku glances to the side to find Shoto, standing by, ready to move with him as soon as the signal is given. The other boy's eyes crinkle slightly in a subtle smile as soon as their eyes meet, as if it's become a reflex. To absolutely no one's, except Izuku's, surprise, not a single person in Class A had even batted an eye when Izuku and Shoto started calling each other by first names. Izuku felt oddly betrayed. Seriously? Everyone else already knew that we were practically dating and no one had the decency to tell me? And yeah, okay, even Izuku knew that didn't make any sense, but he couldn't help feeling affronted for some reason. And, in true 1A fashion, everyone just took it in stride. Dude, breathe, Kirishima had said while patting Izuku's back. In our defense, if we were going to have a bro talk or give advice on something, we thought it would be for Todoroki, not you. Weren't you supposed to be the socially adjusted one? Izuku had thought so too, but apparently he's even more clueless than Todoroki, Ida, and Bakugo combined, and they all just assumed that Izuku already knew. Not for the first time, Izuku wondered if he's surrounded himself with socially inept friends, or if he's actually the socially inept one. I'm just miffed that Todoroki gets to be called by his first name before me, Ribbit. I've been trying to get you to call me Tsuyu since the start of the year. Sorry, Asui. Tsuyu. Izuku smiles back at Shoto without conscious thought. Shoto, Izuku calls, grinning. Ready? It's the exact words he'd said to Shoto at the sports festival. Shoto isn't sure if Izuku's even aware of the callback, but this time he can smile back just as freely as he too calls Izuku by name. Let's go, Izuku. As soon as Kirishima gives the signal, go Totodeku, being the signal, the two boys with half fireworks jump over the railing together. Shoto makes 2 paths of ice from the rafter, spiraling down to each other on either side of the stage. He and Izuku slide down each ramp of ice while shooting bursts of flames over the awed audience, making literal fireworks to the delighted cheers and whoops of the people below. When they reach the ground, they stand on either side of the stage and reach out a hand to each other. Shoto his left, and Izuku his right. Fire bursts out from their outstretched hands, arching over their dancing classmates in a bright wreath and joining above the stage. The 2 streams of fire explode as they merge together, flaring up and bursting into fireworks that look like petals of a flower, or like a brilliant sun, or like the swooping wings of a phoenix as it soars to the sky. The bright flickering red and golden flames illuminate the darkness for the climax and finale, bathing the entire stadium in brilliant light. Izuku can clearly see the smiling and laughing faces of the audience. And there they are. He finds Togata again, holding up Eri so that she's a head above the crowd. Even from this distance he can see how she's flung her arms up into the air, how her cheeks are flushed and... Oh. Tears prickle in Izuku's eyes, but his face breaks into a wide grin. Izuku can't help but turn to look at the other side of the stage. He finds Shoto, who used to have barely any expression at all, who's now smiling so naturally that it's not just visible to Izuku, but the whole world. Shoto is smiling. Eri is smiling. And Izuku, heart-thrumming, eyes wet, throws his head back and laughs. Worth it. After the performance, Eri gets properly introduced to Class 1A, where she's already something of a household legend for the time that she wrapped Izawa in a pink ribbon and around her little finger, whether she knows it or not. When she's introduced to All Might, though, Eri goes wide-eyed and tugs Izuku on the hand. "Is he part of our family, too?" she asks out of the blue. Izuku chokes on air, and All Might coughs up blood. "What? What makes you say that?" Izuku asks weakly. Shoto had asked if he was All Might's illegitimate son, and the media had joked about him being All Might's secret love child, but he never expected Eri of all people to ask the same thing. "He has bunny ears, too," Eri says innocently, pointing at All Might's hair. Izuku and All Might look at each other, then at Eri, then back at each other, and then they both burst out laughing. And yes, while All Might's hair stands up like antennas in his buffed-up form, they do droop down while in his true form, like bunny ears. Oh my god. All Might eventually recovers from his laughing fit, wiping the tears from his eyes, and places a large hand on Eri's head. "I am not a Midoriya, but it would be an honor to be considered part of your family, young Eri." He pats Eri's head carefully, his gaunt face breaking into a gentle smile, and Eri soon smiles back at him. Izuku watches their interaction, an adoring smile on his face, when a small, interrupts his thoughts, and Izuku glances to the side to watch Shoto raise a hand and tug a strand of his two-toned hair thoughtfully. "Maybe I should grow my hair out too," Shoto muses, and Izuku coughs out a startled laugh at that. What's funnier is the fact that Shoto looks at least half serious. "I mean, I wouldn't stop you, but I'd say you're more of a cat," Izuku snickers. Shoto looks at Izuku, then nods, the corner of his lips twitching upwards teasingly. "I suppose not everyone can pull off looking like a bunny." "For the last time, I don't look like a bunny." The rest of their classmates just laugh at him. Traitors. From then, the class splits up into groups to enjoy the rest of the festival. Some people tag along with Izuku and Togata to look after Eri, showing her the sights and letting her try snacks like adoring older siblings. Eri looks around with wide and shining eyes. Everything must be so new to her after being sequestered away by Chisaki for so long. Izuku can't help but smile at the way that Eri seems to be particularly enthralled by the bright balloons decorating everywhere. He crouches down and points to one senior who's handing out some, of all shapes and sizes. "Would you like to get a balloon?" But Eri surprises him with her answer. "No, I want to be a balloon." Izuku freezes at her bright and carefree answer. He warily glances sideways at Uraraka, and, yep, true to his fears, he finds her face alight with unholy glee. Uh-oh. "Uraraka, no." "Uraraka, yes!" And with that excited victory cry, Uraraka borrows a strip of rope from Yaoyorozu, ties it around Eri's waist, steals her gravity, and prances off waving the girl in the air, yelling and cackling madly. Eri's delighted squeals echo throughout the campus. "Don't worry, I won't let her down." "No, that makes me worry. Put her down, Uraraka, I swear to God." Mirio doubles over and laughs so hard that he looks like he's crying. Staff and students alike cheer for them as Izuku, half-heartedly to be honest, chases Uraraka through the campus, and Izuku's pretty sure at least 3 members of Class 1A are filming their wild chase. Eri waves her arms in the air, laughing delightedly. Izuku bites back a grin at the sight, then gives up all pretense of chasing them. He slows his pace, then eventually comes to a stop altogether. He just stands there for a moment, marveling at everything. Eri is smiling, Togata is as bright as ever, All Might and Sir Night-Eye are slowly mending their relationship. All his friends and family are well. Izuku can't stop smiling. He feels high and lightheaded. He wonders if this is what it's like to be drunk. "See," Shoto says as he catches up to Izuku. "I told you it'd be good for her." Izuku grins at him, still feeling high and drunk on happiness. "I never doubted you," he says, and Shoto smiles. "You didn't need to come all the way over here, though. I would have returned sooner or later, you know." Shoto gives him a look. "Now that we're officially together, I'm never letting you out of my sight and risking you running into danger without me." "Oh. Uh-oh." Izuku turns his head and looks off into the faraway distance. Is he sweating? He might be sweating. "Yeah, about that." Shoto goes perfectly still for a moment. When he opens his mouth again, his voice is deceptively calm. "What did you do?" Izuku continues to avoid his eyes. "Well, I went out to buy some supplies early this morning, alone, and ran into Gentle Criminal and might have gotten into a fight." Shoto just stares at Izuku for a long moment, before he raises a hand to cover his eyes. "That's it," he says slowly, and takes Izuku's hand and starts walking towards the crowd determinedly. "Come on, we're going to find Sero and Yaoyorozu to borrow some tape and bubble wrap." "Hey, that's a bit drastic." Villain, cat, nip. It isn't long after the school festival before Class 1A is reunited with Eri. Aizawa brings her to UA on a weekend for her periodical checkup by Recovery Girl, and the hero lets Eri visit the class before going home. Eri is welcomed with open arms, with Sato bringing out his home baking and the girls gathering around to play with her hair. Izuku keeps getting flashbacks to that time that they all turned him into a damned, demented flower bush. There are still pictures floating around the chat room. Thanks, Ojiro. Traitor. Eri's not the only one visiting today, Aizawa tells the class. You have other guests as well. "That would be us." An exuberant voice follows up, and out pops the Wild Wild Pussycats, complete with their trademark pose, much to the delighted welcome of Class 1A. "It's been a while," Izuku greets Kota, who's also tagged along. "Yeah," Kota replies, but he acts surprisingly shy, blushing and not meeting Izuku's eyes. It's almost as if he's not the same kid who called Izuku crazy and an idiot the first day they met. Huh. "Come see this, Midoriya." Mandalay beckons over to him. Her face is teasing and also a little proud as she points to the small, bright red sneakers by the doorway. That can't be anyone but Kota's. He chose them himself. He kept insisting they had to be red. Red, just like Izuku's shoes. It wasn't... Kota waves his arms around frantically in front of his shoes as if trying to hide them from sight, blushing fiercely. Oh, Izuku realizes with a jolt of surprise. He finally understands why Kota's being uncharacteristically shy. Well, it's not like Izuku has any room to judge. It took Izuku weeks to be able to look at All Might and Aizawa without going all starry-eyed after all. At least Kota doesn't have an actual shrine dedicated to him. Right? "Nichan?" "Oh, Eri!" Izuku turns around to find that Eri has escaped the clutches of the girls while they were distracted greeting the Pussycats. The little girl scurries over to Izuku, the many ribbons in her hair fluttering like butterfly wings. She pauses when she spots Kota, though, and promptly hides behind Izuku. After a moment, she peers around Izuku's leg at Kota. And isn't that just adorable? "Eri," Izuku introduces with a smile. "This is Kota. Kota, this is Eri." The two children stare at each other, from either side of Izuku, sizing each other up. Eri eyes the way that Kota is glaring at her with jealousy, and Kota narrows his eyes at the way that Eri is clutching Izuku almost possessively. Rival, they conclude at the same time, and that moment birthed a rivalry that would span a lifetime. Should we separate them?" Shoto asks after the glowering silence between Eri and Kota has stretched on a bit too long. Izuku looks down at the two, then smiles. Nah, they'll get along fine. Shoto raises an eyebrow and pointedly looks between the two children, who are now glaring death at each other. "Like a house on fire," Izuku adds, smiling serenely. For some reason, that doesn't reassure Shoto. "That's supposed to be a good thing, right?" "Right? Izuku?" Izuku just smiles. Mandalay laughs. Aizawa sighs as if he can already feel the future headaches to come from this. Shoto looks at the two children, who are now hissing under each other's breath at one another, and then he looks at Izuku. and he shrugs. Izuku may be thicker than a brick wall when it comes to his own love life, but he could set up a therapy clinic with all the people he's helped, including Shoto himself, so Shoto is just going to default to him on this one and trust him. House on fire, he nods. Sure. Izuku bursts into Shoto's room on a Sunday afternoon after having just returned from a visit home. "You've ruined milk for me," is what he blurts out, completely out of the blue. Shoto blinks. Huh? And honey, too. Excuse me? Izuku starts pacing around the room, gesturing wildly with his hands. It's not even specifically warmed milk with honey. It's just milk and honey in general. Like I was just getting Aerie milk for her cereal this morning, and as soon as I see the carton, I think of you. And we don't even have honey in our house, but when we went grocery shopping, I saw a jar of honey, and suddenly you're on my mind. Shoto slowly sinks down into his futon to take a seat and watch Izuku rant. He has no idea what has Izuku so frazzled, but he figures that Izuku will get to the point when he's ready. And, as if that's not bad enough, it doesn't even end with milk and honey. I see a book and I think, oh, Shoto might like that. Or I see a poster for a movie and I wonder if you'd like to go watch it together. Aerie gave me a candied apple today, and my first instinct was to bring it back and show it to you. And I knew you weren't there with me today at home, but I kept turning around to talk to you as if you were, as if you should be. Izuku ruffles his hair roughly, making some strands of the hair fall out of his half-bun so that his hair looks even fluffier than usual. Shoto's tempted to pet it back into place, but decides to hold off until Izuku has worked off whatever has gotten into him. And the thing is, now that I think about it, this isn't even a recent development. I just hadn't noticed it before. It was so natural, so gradual. For so long you've been a constant presence in my mind, and I want you to be there. Almost everything links back to you, and Izuku trails off as he finally halts his pacing. He looks at Shoto with an almost lost expression. How could I have not known that I loved you? And Shoto just stares at Izuku for a long moment. Then he buries his flaming face in his palms with a groan. Oh my God. Shoto groans. How do you keep saying things like that, with such a straight face? He peeks out from between his fingers to half-heartedly glare at Izuku. You're just not fair, he sighs. Before, Izuku would have been confused and clueless at those vague words, but now he smiles cheekily. You love me for it, Izuku snaps back jokingly, and Shoto lets out a small huff of laughter. I do, he acknowledges, completely sincere despite Izuku's joking tone. You know that, right? Izuku kneels down on the futon in front of Shoto, and Shoto takes his hand away from his face to reach out and hold Izuku's gently, ever so gently. Izuku lets him, exasperated and touched and so unbearably fond. He smiles. I know. Izuku and Shoto share so many similarities. They both have half-fire quirks that they used to hate. They both were subject to household abuse. They both have daddy issues, to put it lightly. They're both trying to grow past all of it. But while their similarities let them bond and understand each other better, they're still very different people. For instance, out of the two of them, Izuku is the one with the potty mouth, and Izuku will casually drop a swear word here and there. He blames having grown up with Bakugo as his childhood friend, whereas Shoto will only curse sparingly, if at all. Izuku is also the one who frequently uses pet names. While the Midoriya household has been painfully careful with physical affection, Inko has always used a variety of endearments that Izuku seems to have unknowingly picked up on, too. Inko calls Izuku everything from sweetie to honey, and Izuku finds himself unconsciously dropping the same endearments to both his little sister and his boyfriend. Aerie had giggled as she pointed out that both Inko and Izuku used the same pet names, while Shoto had dropped his mug and shattered it on the floor, the first time Izuku unconsciously called him darling. Shoto blushes beautifully whenever Izuku casually drops an endearment, but he himself never uses one. Izuku isn't upset about it, because Shoto pronounces Izuku like some people say beloved or dearest, because his lips caress Izuku's name like it's the sweetest endearment that could ever be shaped by his tongue, because he says Izuku the same way that Izuku calls him darling. And while Izuku may casually fluster Shoto whenever he uses endearments, he's the one who's flustered whenever Shoto touches him. Shoto thinks it's so messed up that, out of the two of them, while Izuku is more socially adjusted, it's Shoto who's more familiar with physical intimacy, physical affection, or romance in general. It's just so messed up what that implies. Because, you see, although Rei was forced into an arranged marriage, Endeavor still took her out on dates and gave her flowers. Rei still loved and kissed and hugged her children freely until she snapped and was sent away. Izuku never saw anything like that. He never saw Hisashi do a kind thing for Inko, never saw what a healthy relationship was supposed to look like. Inko loved Izuku dearly, but she didn't dare hug him because she loved him, afraid that she would worsen his injuries with her embrace. This is the reason that Shoto reins in his impulse to just lean closer. It's why he limits himself to hand-holding and gentle hugs. It's why he stops himself before he can dip his head to catch Izuku's lips in his teeth. Because while the fact that they're dating each other means that now Shoto can do those things, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Shoto doesn't fully understand what it must feel like to be traumatized by love, but he can tell that it's not easy for Izuku to work through that and be with him. But Izuku is trying. He's trying, damn it, and it melts Shoto's heart because he can tell. He can feel the way Izuku tenses before relaxing every time they hug. He can see how counterintuitive it is for Izuku to reach out instead of pulling away. But Izuku's trying so hard to break old habits and meet Shoto halfway. So it's the least Shoto can do to not push him and let Izuku adjust at his own pace. They can take their time. This is pretty much how their relationship progresses. Izuku casually flustering Shoto one moment, Shoto making Izuku blush bright red the next. Give and take. Push and pull. Like breathing. Class 1A is of the opinion that they're either adorable or disgusting depending on who you ask. Action, drama, fluff, romance, best year of school ever. I give it a 10 out of 10. Would enroll again. Ashido nods sagely when Hagakure pretends to interview her, whereas Bakugo only responds with a glare and fuck off and die. Wow, that was pretty tame coming from Bakugo, Ojiro remarks from where he's lounging on the sofa. Indeed, Tokuyami nods. By this point, Class 1A has gotten far too used to Bakugo's glares and death wishes for it to faze them in the slightest. Where are Midori and Todoroki anyways? Sato asks as he emerges from the kitchen and is carrying a plate of cookies. I have leftovers for them to try and reheat, but no one answered when I knocked on either of their rooms. Ida, do you know? Kirishima prompts. Ida straightens his spine and puffs out his chest. Of course. As class president, it's my duty to keep track of our classmates. Wait a sec, Uraraka gasps. It's a date, isn't it? They're on a date. Hagakure squeals at that, while Kaminari groans and boos. It's actually a far serious matter compared to that. Yayorozu heads off, almost apologetically. They've gone to go visit Endeavor at the hospital. The common room quickly sobers up at her quiet words. Most of them saw the battle between Endeavor and the Nomu live on television. While Endeavor ultimately won, it was very, very close. Yeah, I guess it makes sense for Todoroki to go see his dad after that, Jiro says sadly. But Ida shakes his head. Actually, I believe it was Todoroki only tagging along to keep Midoriya company. Huh? Wait, then that means that the person who wanted to see Endeavor is... Being a bad person is not the same thing as being a villain. Todoroki Enji is not a villain, but he is a bad person. A bad husband, a bad father, and a bad man. Only recently has he been able to slowly come to this realization. Even before this change, Endeavor was objective enough to know that none of his children would come rushing to visit him at the hospital, even after such a close brush with death. But when he's informed that he is a guest from UA, he can't help but hope. He should have known better. When the door opens, the person who enters does indeed have a half-fire quirk, but it isn't the boy Endeavor was expecting. Midori Izuku, he greets slowly. Endeavor? Izuku returns, his smile just a tad too wide, too sharp, too full of teeth to be sincere. Silence falls between the two for a long moment after that. Izuku stands there, pointedly ignoring the chair by Endeavor's bedside. Unlike when they met at the sports festival, Endeavor doesn't start rambling on his own, but waits quietly for Izuku to open the conversation. Izuku eyes the new, dark scar Endeavor has just gained. It marks the left side of his face, just like his youngest son, after all these years. Calling it just desserts would be crude, and saying it's poetic justice would just be cruel. Izuku isn't either, so he keeps his mouth closed and just stands there wordlessly for a moment. To be honest, Izuku himself can't say for certain why he came to see Endeavor. He's never been a huge fan of the Flame Hero, even before learning of the abuse, and after he did, well. But even so, there are some things Izuku can't deny. Endeavor is still the number 2 hero. He's still Shoto's father. He's still someone Izuku used to look up to. Todoroki Enji is a bad person, but Endeavor is not a villain. And being a bad person is not the same thing as being a villain, and Izuku... I once told you my father also had a fire quirk, Izuku finally says quietly. Endeavor blinks, then slightly inclines his head to show that he remembers without interrupting. His attitude and willingness to listen is so different from the last time they met that it almost throws Izuku off track. He also used me and my mother for his own purpose. Izuku watches Endeavor's face carefully as he says the next sentence. He's been in prison for the last 10 years, and will be for the rest of his life. Ah, there it is. As a hardcore fan of heroes, Izuku grew up watching many videos of interviews, fights, and rescue scenes. The hero he watched the most was, without question, All Might. Eraserhead would have been right up there with him, if only he didn't avoid cameras like the plague, which means that the honor of second place went to Endeavor. So while Izuku may have never liked Endeavor, even before learning of what he did to his family, he still knows the hero well enough to be able to see the subtle shift in his expression, the way the line of his mouth presses downwards, how his brow draws into a grimace, the tightening of his eyes. Izuku doubts that Endeavor would have reacted like this before. It's proof that Endeavor has changed. For better or worse, Izuku can't say yet, but he's changed. That doesn't make everything all right, of course. Just because Endeavor has changed and is trying doesn't automatically absolve his sins or mean that he's deserving of forgiveness. That decision is still solely the right of his victims. But as someone who used to look up to Endeavor, as someone who's been burned by his true nature, as someone who cares for his son, Izuku decides that it's enough for him to give the man, the hero, the father, a second chance. For Shoto's sake, if nothing else, because while Shoto may have refused to come see Endeavor himself, Izuku saw the way Shoto's hands shook and clenched when Endeavor was pushed into a corner by the new Nomu. He was there when Shoto's legs gave out in relief after seeing Endeavor's victory, and he was the one who helped him walk shakily back to his room. Just because someone is your father doesn't mean they won't hurt you. Likewise, just because you hate someone doesn't mean you don't still care for them in some way. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I used to look up to you as a hero. I thought I was seeing someone different than my father. I hate what you've done as a husband and a father, but I do see what you're trying to do to change now. So, Izuku pins Endeavor with a look. I'll be watching. Watch me, Endeavor had told the world, pled to his family, at the Japanese hero billboard chart. The man nods solemnly. That is all I ask for. Another moment of silence descends before Izuku breaks it again. Right, he says briskly. He got the main reason for his visit out of the way, so we might as well get this over with and go rejoin Shoto. I heard your favorite food is uzumoki, so I got this for you as a get-well gift. Izuku tosses a small package to Endeavor, who catches it easily. He's about to give his thanks when he notices the contents of it. Endeavor blinks and then looks at Izuku. These are carrot sticks, he says haltingly. I know. Izuku reassures him with a bland smile. Endeavor stares even more. You heard I like uzumoki. Uh-huh. And you got me carrot sticks instead. Yep. Endeavor is at a loss for words. His own children tend to be passive-aggressive, or just plain aggressive, in their defiance, so he's never experienced anything like Midori Izuku. He wonders if this is what they call trolling. Satisfied with his handiwork, Izuku cheerily bids Endeavor goodbye and leaves his hospital room. Shoto is waiting for him just outside, leaning against the wall on the other side of the door. I'm done here, Izuku tells him. Are you sure you don't want to go see him? Shoto hesitates for a moment. He glances at the closed door of Endeavor's hospital room, then nods firmly. I'm sure. Izuku doesn't push any further. They walk side by side as they leave the hospital. Shoto takes Izuku's hand and gently rubs his scars before carefully saying his next words. You know, you didn't have to come if it was for me. I know how much you don't like him, if you felt obligated or something just because we're together. But Izuku shakes his head. No, don't worry, I wanted to. And then he smiles and changes the subject to something lighter. By the way, send my thanks to Fuyumi-san for telling me about the uzumoki, would you? Yeah. Why did you ask her? You didn't even buy it. I just wanted to make sure I didn't give Endeavor his favorite food by accident. Shoto coughs out a laugh and smiles fondly. You're such a troll. What did you give him? Carrot sticks? Figures. Huh? Bunny. Am not. They jostle each other as they laugh at the familiar banter, and Izuku marvels at how easy and natural it feels when it's only been a few weeks, months at most. Then again, it's always been like that with him and Shoto. From the moment they reached out to each other, they just clicked, fit together like two pieces of a puzzle, instantly drawn in by an orbital force and bound with an intimacy that transcended time. Some people drift apart with the passing of time. They may have a falling out or grow weary of each other, but Izuku likes to think, to hope, that they'll only grow closer as time passes. that they'll grow into each other and around each other as they grow old together. Izuku smiles and squeezes their intertwined hands. Shoto squeezes back. Shoto, Eri, his friends, heroes, and family. Life may not be fair or kind, but he still looks forward to a future with them. Alright everyone, this concludes Chapter 22 of Burn Your Wings. Chapter 23 will be next, and because of how short the final chapter, which is the epilogue, is for Chapter 24, I'll be including both of those in the next video, which will conclude the entirety of Burn Your Wings. Hope you guys are enjoying this one still, and as always, thank you so much for listening.